When will we be able to replace Patriot with our own air defense system? How are drones now reaching the Baltic and how is that affecting Russia? And when will our own ballistic missiles start flying there? That is what we are going to discuss today with aviation expert Valeriy Romanenko. Welcome Valeriy and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Hello.
I would like to start with some positive news about how, for the third week in a row, various Ukrainian things have been flying toward the Baltic ports. Our attacks have already cut the exports of the Baltic oil ports in half. But the question is, why now exactly? What made it possible for our drones to reach that area? Did we not have such capabilities before? Or has something changed dramatically?
Most likely, something really has changed. In any case, various unconfirmed and, of course, questionable sources are saying that we were supposedly given a corridor over certain countries. An air corridor. And that would mean we can fly through those countries, reach the Baltic Sea, and then strike the Russians from over the sea. In other words, we would no longer need to fly over zones where our drones could be shot down for distances of more than 1,000 kilometers, or roughly that kind of distance. But again, I should stress that these are unconfirmed sources. These assumptions are circulating online right now and being discussed by experts. Still, it does sound very plausible. At the same time, the lack of any reaction from the Russians is, overall, a little alarming. And I would not rule out that we may in fact have managed to chart a route that bypasses Russian air defense zones, and did so on our own, without help from our loyal allies such as the Baltic states and Poland. So there are two main possibilities: either we did it ourselves and finally have enough range and enough drones to pull this off, or there was outside help. Because, you know, if you want to carry out a strike like that, you cannot send 3 or 5 drones, you need to launch at least 50 so that something actually gets through, if they have to fly over Russian territory. And the results are somewhat better, if they do not fly over Russian territory, because then they can only be intercepted on the final stretch, when they are actually approaching their targets.
And to support what you are saying, there are statements from Maria Zakharova, who has been issuing threats toward the Baltic countries, precisely because they supposedly helped facilitate Ukrainian strikes that are now reaching Russian territory. Of course, we would very much like that to be true, that the Europeans really are helping us. But besides the Baltic, things are also still flying toward Novorossiysk. So we understand that we are now effectively restricting their ability to export oil. If these attacks continue, and we believe they will, then will Russia really have no other routes left for exporting and selling its oil? Or are they now trying to move as much air defense there as possible to prevent that scenario?
So far, there is no objective information showing that air defense is being reinforced there. At any rate, there is nothing we can read, because the Russians are now shutting down all sorts of sources, Telegram channels and so on, that could have given us some insight. But most likely, to concentrate air defense there, they would first have to get it from somewhere. Either from current production, and the Russians are not producing many systems right now, or by pulling it out of other areas. And from where exactly? From around Moscow. Who is going to let them remove anything from there? Let everything burn elsewhere. But those 5 S-400 regiments that protect Moscow will go on protecting Moscow no matter what happens. And no one is going to let them remove the Pantsir systems from Putin's residence in Valdai either. So even if the Russians wanted to strengthen air defense around their most important sites, their capabilities are, unfortunately for them, extremely limited. They constantly have to restore, not reinforce, air defense all along the front line. Because they are suffering huge losses in air defense assets, both launches and radar systems, for example in Crimea. Besides, our drones are capable of operating with Starlink, and they are striking effectively all along the front line. Now, that is not at great depth, because Starlink does not work over Russia, but at shallow depth it still does. There is a certain limit where it reaches. So yes, they may want to strengthen their air defense, but they do not really have the means to do it.
But going back to the question of the Novorossiysk and Baltic ports, will the Russians really be unable to export their oil at all, if those key ports are blocked for them?
They are not fully blocked, tankers are still loading, but the pace is not the same. And pace matters to the Russians. For example, they completely missed the window of opportunity when oil prices spiked, because of the war in the Persian Gulf. Let us say they were given every possible opportunity. Let us speak plainly and not play with words. They were given maximum assistance by the United States. But even then, only the oil that had already left the ports was allowed through. We did not let them load new oil. And now oil prices are falling again. So the moment was chosen extremely well, and the Russians did not manage to take advantage of that opportunity to sharply replenish their finances.
That is certainly excellent news, especially since they had already started getting ahead of themselves and wanted to manipulate the Europeans, saying, "You will still come crawling to us on your knees and beg for our oil and gas." But as you can see, that manipulation did not work. I also want to mention the strike on Novorossiysk. When Caliber missile carriers were burning there, Magyar talked about it, wrote about it, and published video footage. We can see that our warriors are systematically taking out the enemy fleet. So the question is, how many of those Caliber carriers do the Russians still have left?
Well, of course we are optimists, but let us stay realistic too. Right. The frigate Admiral Makarov, which was damaged in Novorossiysk, the one that was struck there, was only lightly damaged. Nothing more than that. And overall, it will most likely return to launching missiles at Ukrainian cities after a short repair. Unfortunately, we do not yet have the kind of weapon that would definitively finish it off. If, say, a firepoint carrying 800 kilograms of explosives had hit it, then yes, we could have clearly said, that is one less ship. In total, Russia has 3 such frigates: Makarov, Essen, and Grigorovich. Incidentally, all 3 frigates are named after admirals from the era of the Russo-Japanese War, when Japan utterly crushed the Russian fleet. I hope we will repeat that Japanese feat that happened in 1905, and we will repeat the one that happened in 1927.
That would be wonderful. By the way, there has also been information about Firepoint working on developing our own air defense. Other manufacturers are saying the same thing, that they are also working on it. Will we be able, in the near future, to replace Patriots that way and stop depending on the United States? Or could it be something else instead?
Let us put it this way, we will not even come close to Patriot's capabilities. And that will remain the case for many years. Because Patriot is a system that was developed over many years by the most powerful defense corporations in the world. We will not be able to do that in one stroke. Even if we were given a license, it still would not help us much. So if Firepoint wants to create something, then it needs to establish contacts with the Luch Design Bureau. There was a system there that had been developed almost to completion, based on our R-27 missiles. Something for destroying Shaheds and Russian cruise missiles is realistic, because here we do have certain competencies and a certain expertise. But we can't create something comparable to Patriot under our current conditions, when we are under attack, when we lack the necessary expertise, when Ukraine has never developed anti-missile systems before. We don't have any experience in this. And a company that only got into missile development a couple of years ago can maybe come up with a concept, but no more than that. Most likely, it will not even be able to produce an experimental model in the next few years. Especially since the specialists who were actually capable of creating missiles are all in Dnipro. And Firepoint is, let us say, in another city, while Dnipro is under constant attack. And that enterprise, that design bureau which developed missiles, is practically being hit by Molniya drones all the time. Trying to create something radical, something that complex, under such conditions is incredibly difficult. And, let us be honest, the cost of a Patriot surface-to-air missile system runs into billions of dollars, roughly $1.5 to $2 billion. We simply are not in a position to do that right now.
Still, even if we did try, we would not be able to reduce the cost dramatically.
We could make it cheaper. But it would not be able to intercept missiles. Aircraft and cruise missiles, possibly. But I do not believe that is possible to create a cheap missile capable of hitting another missile at speeds of 10 Mach. Because the speed of the missile and the speed of the interceptor add up, so we are talking about more than 10 Mach. Honestly, I just do not believe it. Because those technologies are too complex.
That's a strong point.
And besides, creating a system is not the same as creating a missile. Maybe we could get some kind of analog, maybe some American components, maybe we could make the missile itself, but then you still need the launcher, the appropriate radar, and the command and control station.
We still want to believe that one day something like that will appear here. But speaking of the Russians, do they have the ability to shoot down ballistic missiles? Because they are already talking about our possible capabilities and about the possibility that, by May 9th, our ballistic missiles could already be flying toward them. At least Firepoint has only announced that it is finishing development, and testing still lies ahead. So do the Russians really have anything capable of shooting down ballistic missiles?
That depends on where exactly our ballistic missiles are launched. If we are talking about launches near the front line, then yes, the Russians have enough systems there, S-400s, S-300s, but only the latest models. And they are capable of shooting down missiles like the FP-7. They did shoot down HIMARS. There was a time when we would fire a salvo of 5 HIMARS and only one would get through. So yes, they can shoot them down. But of course, when they were shooting down HIMARS, that was, I believe, in 2023, right? Or was it 2024? And now the Russians have fewer of those systems, while we will be launching these missiles having already gained experience from using American HIMARS. That means we will calculate the launch points in such a way as to find places where there are no systems at that moment, or where the S-400 simply cannot reach. And the S-400 has very limited capabilities when it comes to engaging ballistic targets. So I think that as soon as we get even our first ballistic missiles, even these short-range operational tactical ones, what they call FPC, which fit that classification, something like the American ATACMS. So once we start using them, Russia will explode. Its telegram channels, its information space, everything will explode. And we will clearly find out whether those missiles can reach the Russians. Most likely they will, because the Russians simply do not have enough means. Right now, what are they using to shoot down our cruise missiles and drones? Aviation, TOR systems, Pantsir systems, all of those are short-range systems. None of those three components work against ballistic missiles. Absolutely not at all. Maybe the latest book models can do something against them, but that is 50-50. Practice will show whether they are capable of intercepting them. So the appearance of Ukrainian ballistic missiles will be a game changer. Especially if missiles arrive with a range of 900 kilometers, the ones they call the FP9.